After years of living in a noisy, crowded city filled with honking cars and shouting neighbors, I decided I needed a fresh start. I left behind the chaos and moved to an old farmhouse in rural Indiana. I dreamed of peace, a quiet place where I could finally rest. I had grown tired of sleepless nights in cramped apartments, always bothered by distant sirens and the constant hum of city life. The farmhouse was surrounded by endless cornfields. Every morning, golden stalks danced under a wide, clear sky. The air smelled of fresh, damp earth and freedom. And at night, I would lie by my bedroom window listening to the gentle chirps of crickets. For a moment, I felt safe and hopeful. But one night, my peaceful routine shattered. While I was sitting by the window, watching the moonlight trace the lines of the corn, I suddenly heard a heavy rustling sound outside, like someone walking in thick boots through dry leaves. My heart pounded as I peered into the dark, half-lit field. I told myself it was just a deer or a stray animal, but the sound felt too deliberate. The next evening, the noise came again, closer this time. I pressed my face against the cold glass, trying to see in the shifting shadows. Then, through a break in the clouds, I caught sight of a tall, still figure standing just 20 feet from the house. I felt a chill run down my spine. I had moved here to feel safe, but now I was certain I was being watched. Trembling, I called 911 and hid in the closet as I whispered my story to the comm operator. Minutes later, sirens echoed in the night, and the police searched the property. They found no footprints or signs of anyone. They simply said, "It is just the shadows playing tricks." But I knew what I had seen. Night after night, I lay awake, every sound making my heart race. I began keeping a kitchen knife close, and even at work, I flinched at every unexpected noise. Then one morning, while brushing my teeth, I saw the dark shape again, now only 10 feet from the bathroom window. My hand dropped my toothbrush as I backed away, my heart thumping wildly. Desperate for proof, I bought a small camera and set it up to monitor the yard. At 2:03 a.m., the screen lit up with an image of a hooded figure stepping out of the corn. The figure's pale hands clutched something small, and his head slowly turned toward the lens. The sight made my stomach twist, and before I could react further, the camera's feed froze. I left the house in panic, driving to a nearby motel until I felt safe enough to return. When I went back, the camera was gone, its wires torn off as if someone had deliberately removed it. A few days later, a local paper reported that a drifter named Daniel Ray Walsh had been caught breaking into homes far away. His description, a man in a hooded jacket with pale hands, matched the figure from my camera. I eventually moved back to the city, but now I keep my curtains drawn and never forget the sound of rustling corn that still haunts my dreams. Story number 2. After a painful breakup and the echoes of my ex's harsh words ringing in my head, I desperately needed a fresh start. I found an apartment in Chicago that seemed perfect, a small, older building with character and a low rent. I imagined a new life away from my past. But the moment I stepped into the apartment, I was hit by a strange, overpowering smell. It was sharp and sweet, like rotting fruit mixed with something even darker. In that instant, My new beginning felt tainted. The apartment was old. Its stairwell was damp, and the walls were covered with peeling paint. I tried to tell myself that these were just signs of an old building, and that I could handle it. After all, I had signed the lease in a moment of hope. I unpacked my boxes, determined to prove to myself, and to the voice of my ex, who once said, "You'll never make it alone," that I was stronger than my past. On the first day, I followed the odor to the kitchen wall. I pressed my hand against the cold, rough plaster, wondering if a dead mouse might be hidden behind it. But the smell was different, too sweet and unsettling to be just decay. I opened the windows to let in the busy city sounds, honking horns and distant chatter, but the smell clung to every corner. I called the landlord, a man who always had a toothpick in his mouth and barely met my eyes. "It might be old pipes," he mumbled. He promised to send someone, but nothing happened. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. The smell filled my throat with every breath, and as I lay in the dark, I began to hear a soft thump coming from behind the wall. My heart pounded, and sweat formed on my forehead as I listened closely. Then I heard a slow scratching sound, as if something was moving behind the plaster. At work, I found it hard to concentrate on spreadsheets while my mind replayed that eerie sound. At home, I tried to block the noise with towels under the doors, but the scratching grew louder and closer, as if it was pacing right behind my bed. I stopped eating, and every taste reminded me of that foul odor. One desperate night, I snapped. With shaking hands, I grabbed a crowbar and tore a hole in the wall. As pieces of plaster fell, the overpowering smell hit me like a wave. I shone my phone's light into the opening and saw something I would never forget. A dark, wet bundle of cloth, and horrifyingly, a shriveled human arm lying among the debris. I screamed in terror, the sound echoing through the empty apartment. When the police arrived, they uncovered more evidence. The remains belonged to a woman named Maria Delgado, a tenant who had vanished 2 years earlier. The landlord claimed he did not know what had happened, but I saw the truth in his twitching jaw. I left that apartment as quickly as I could, but the smell still follows me. I now shower several times a day, scrubbing away the memory, afraid that I might never escape what I saw behind those walls. Story number 3. After my father passed away, leaving behind heavy hospital bills and a deep sense of loss, I took a job at a small call center in Oregon. The work was simple, and the office was in a strip mall near a busy street. The place smelled of burnt coffee and cheap carpet cleaner, and the constant hum of fluorescent lights became my new reality. I wore a wrinkled blue shirt every day and clung to the routine, hoping that the steady work would help me forget my grief. For 6 months, I answered calls and recorded complaints, my mind often wandering to memories of my dad. I sat quietly in my cubicle, barely noticing the passing hours, until one night something unusual happened. It was a late shift, and the office was nearly empty. The clock ticked slowly past 11 p.m. When the phone rang, I answered it as usual. But instead of a customer complaint, I heard static, followed by a low, wet voice whispering, "All alone, aren't you, sweet thing? Blue shirt, little green plant." I froze. I looked at my desk and saw my small cactus and my blue shirt, just as the voice described. My heart pounded as I tried to speak, but only managed to stutter that the line was for customer support. The voice chuckled, slow and sinister. "I see you tapping your foot. Nervous, huh? I like that." In a flash, I tore off my headset and sat there, my hands shaking, and the room suddenly feeling too small and dark. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I unplugged the phone and checked every door and window when I got home. I kept my father's old baseball bat close by, unable to sleep with the memory of that voice echoing in my mind. The next night, the phone rang again. The voice said, "You can't shut me out. I missed you last night." "Did you miss me?" My stomach churned with fear, and I whispered, "Who are you?" The reply came softly, "Your shadow, darling. Turn around. I'm closer than you think." I spun around, but saw only the dark corners of my room. The calls became a nightly terror. Every time I heard that voice, it noticed small details about me. A coffee stain here, the smell of lavender on my skin, and it made me feel completely exposed and vulnerable. I tried recording one call, but when the police checked, they dismissed it as a prank or a technical glitch. Still, I knew the voice was real. The final call came at midnight. "You're mine now," the voice purred, followed by the sound of a door opening in the hallway. I grabbed my keys and ran out, my footsteps echoing in the empty building until dawn. Later, the police arrested a man named Paul Everett, a former employee who had been secretly watching us through security cameras. They found photos of me and many other employees, taken without our knowledge. I quit the job immediately and moved away. But even now I sleep with the lights on, haunted by the memory of that voice. A constant reminder that some shadows never truly disappear. Thanks for listening. Subscribe for more horror and crime stories. Goodbye.